Now that that's out of the way, the backstory. I have had a on again off again relationship with this girl since junior high. We've constantly been in each other's lives, even to this day we still talk. I thought I was in love with her. Shocker, I wasn't. But in high school things got pretty serious between us. And the more serious we got, the worse we treated each other when we fought. It was the most toxic relationship I have ever been in. But we are actually great friends now. At the time I was working stock crew at the mall toy store. Sometimes it was a early morning shift. Sometimes it was overpass. So my sleep schedule was all messed up. We were dating and sleeping together pretty regularly my entire senior year. She had her circle of friends, I had mine, and they rarely intersected. Enter Dickhead Kyle. Now Dickhead Kyle gave a bad name to all other monster chugging, drywall assaulting Kyles. He was physically and mentally abusive to his girlfriend, later wife. He manipulated his friends into letting him walk all over them. Got one girl hooked on pills after he got her pregnant, so she would be forced to give the baby up. Just a next level scumbag. Kyle was a part of both our circles. He was friends with a few acquaintances I had, and the girl was pretty close to his girlfriend. The girl and I had just had a really bad fight a few days before, and had made up in our usual way. As I was getting ready to go to bed for work the next morning, my phone went off. It was a text from Kyle followed by 3 pictures. One nude of my girlfriend, one of my girlfriend and his, and the last one only half loaded, but it was clearly a picture of my girlfriend giving him a blowjob. I was furious, but as I was already graduated I wouldn't run into him again to take my rage out the traditional way, so I just said forget it and moved on with my life. I was still mad at the girl for cheating on me again. This happened multiple times on both ends, so it was forgiven pretty quickly. So we fought it out a few times and eventually made up. When she told me the whole story, Kyle had told her I was sleeping with his girlfriend's sister or something, and that this was how she should get back at me. Now was it petty and dumb? Absolutely. But he wasn't so bright and the story wasn't so far-fetched that she didn't believe him. She told me that, since it was bullcrap on his end, she was done with both of them, and we went on with our lives. The start of the long game. A few years go by, the girl has moved to another state, but we still keep in touch, and out of the blue Kyle's wife hits me up on the Book of Faces. We talk about how our life has been and whatnot, where we live and such. Turns out she's just down the street from me. We keep talking every so often. When she texts one day asking for a favor, I'm not working that day and bored out of my mind, so I oblige and run a pack of smokes down to her since she's out and can't get more because of her kid. I get to her apartment and we hang out for a bit talking. We head out to the patio for a cigarette, and in the daylight her shirt is almost completely see-through. I make her offhand comment about it, and without a second thought she pulls her shirt off. We go back inside and go to town on each other on her and Kyle's bed. We keep the affair going a few weeks, then just kinda stop. At this point I felt my revenge was complete. I had this guy's wife on his bed, and he won't know till they get into another huge fight. I wipe my hands of the drama and go about my day. Fast forward another few years, my band had just finished a huge show before we went on tour, and as I'm doing the meet and greet thing at our merch booth, I get a Facebook message from Kyle before the quarantined non-friend messages. Kyle was in the hospital. He said it was serious and had a question. Did you ever spend time with Hannah? I'm looking at this text thinking of all the ways I could mess with his head, but decided to probe a little by saying I think that's something you should ask her first. He replies I did, and she told me something happened at our apartment. I need to know if it's true. So I think for a second and send him 2 pictures we took, one of her giving me oral and one of the aftermath. He just replies THX and blocked me. I think good. Now the dick knows what it feels like and go about my merry. But this story isn't done yet, friendus. Not by a long shot. See, unbeknownst to me, Hannah and Kyle had another kid around 9 months after our affair, and it wasn't Kyle's. From the pictures it was obvious that we didn't use protection and there was no pullout, so he immediately suspected it was mine. Hannah knew better, since she was already pregnant when we started, but just barely. Kyle viewed me as his enemy ever since high school because I stole all of his friends. So knowing that he was raising the child of someone he hated just burnt him up inside. He turned to hard drugs and became a raging alcoholic, tried to get information on where I lived, and kept trying to get revenge on me for all of this but failed miserably. Lost his job, his family, what few longtime friends he had. Basically his life just crashed around him. About 2 years ago I reconnected with another ex from high school, and she told me the aftermath, what Kyle tried to do, what ended up happening to his life. Hannah took him for everything in their divorce. Last I heard he's locked up for robbing a liquor store while carrying methamphetamines and a loaded pistol, which landed him in for about 12 years. Once upon a time, when I was in 8th grade, I had 2 bullies, a kid and a teacher. So, let's see the cast. Me, English teacher, bully. So, let's go to the story. The plot happened like this. In my schools in Puerto Rico, I had a bully that unfortunately was always put into my home, a room of 30 students approximately over and over. And at 8th grade I had an English teacher that had a lot of errors in grammar or speech. People say I have the patience of Job all the time, so it was easy to target me. Do you remember how a rubber band works? That was me. The teacher was yelling at me because I wasn't at the same level as the class and had a different pronunciation as my teacher. Until one day I waited until after the class I told her that she did something wrong in class. So she destroyed my scholarship because she will not give me anything other than a C after the event. So, no music, no money to study, no peace at my house. My parents were abusive in the worst ways, so they stepped it up a notch. My friends started to make my bully go against the English teacher as I started to do pranks and mess around with all her stuff, like unfolding the chairs she would use, hide her keys, put menacing notes in her desk or purse, and accredited the glory to my bully, until she became paranoid in the classroom. But nobody suspects of the nice teacher's pet that apologized to the English teacher. One day I decided to do the coup de grace and aggravated him until he was yelling at English teacher, and English teacher was trying to scold and drag him to the principal of the school. Then my bully got out of her grasp and started fighting her. So I had a thought. While the commotion was going on, I broke her windows and mirrors in her car with an extra shirt from his gym bag, then used the shards to scratch all her paint off and left the shirt in the crime scene. My bully got suspended and banned from most of the schools in the area, and my English teacher had a mental breakdown and was forced to retire while I told her about the whole plan as she deteriorated. Not my story, but a very close friend of mine who told me this. He was sexually abused by his stepfather ever since he was 6 and was violated around his 8th year. His biological father died of a work-related accident, and his mother married this stepfather that she knew from her hometown a few years after. That fatherly figure soon turned out to be an abusive monster that was oh so eager to put his hands on anything that moves. His mother didn't know of the sexual abuse that he was going through because the son was threatened by death of his mother and him if he says anything. He was in an ever worse situation. After getting bullied and abused, he was completely suicidal. He was debating on just jumping in front of a semi and end it all multiple times. But his mother was the only reason he didn't want to do it and kept pushing on through it all. He started slowly making a few friends that helped him cope a little. On his 10th he was violently molested and was left limping after his father went all out on him. He was forced to go to school a day after and was limping from the pain, unable to sit at all, unable to move, but he endured it and shrugged it off as an accident so that no one finds out what happens. He saw what the man can do. He doesn't want his mother hurt or worse because he told on this monster. Even the bullies stopped making fun of him after seeing that he didn't care anymore about what they did to him, more uninterested in bullying an inanimate object than pity. A few older senior students who were a mix of 16 and 18-year-old caught up to what happened and pulled him aside one day to ask what happened. They all sat down and talked. Although they knew what was happening, they merely asked to confirm what's going on. My friend who told them to not spread it as it means life and death to him, and especially his mother, let out all the information out of pure fear. From about 5 or 6 behemoths towering around him and years of abuse killing his self-esteem, the seniors were not amused, not one bit. They were all hellbent on making this man regret his life choices and make him regret it. They did. They stalked him, cornered him, and afterwards went completely berserk on him, sodomized him with a multitude of tools, carved child rapist on his back, beat the bejesus out of his testicles to the point where he was quite literally peeing blood, and continued beating him up in the process and afterwards just to really nail the point in. They didn't want him to die, they wanted him to live and suffer from it. He was rushed to the hospital with both his arms broken on multiple points, eye socket collapsed, and eye heavily damaged with no chance of repair. Both his testicles were ruptured and are damaged beyond salvation. His anus was ripped to the size of a 22cm ball, and he lost about 70% of his teeth. There was more, but it will take this whole post just to list all the damage dealt. They caught him at the brink of death from all the bleeding and managed to keep him alive somehow. The next day they told his mom of what happened and what he did to him. She wasn't just filing for divorce, she took everything he ever owned, all the money he made, and afterwards had him put behind bars with a little birdie that told every inmate inside of what he did. Last he heard of him was that he was being used quite literally as the prison soap dispenser while in the pen. He didn't die, but he was left with a gait that would make even hot Kinky Joe jealous, roaming the streets, shunned by everyone, and they still regularly tell people of who he is and what he did to publicly shame him for what he did, losing him any job possible, and barred from many establishments, and was regularly stoned. Hissed at and yelled at to go away like a stray dog. There was no mercy for him. 5 years of child abuse, a lifetime of hell on earth. My friend now is 26 years old, works in a decent place where he is beyond respected, his mother living with him, still single sadly, but he is now living a better life than what he had when he was a kid. He left the country where all of this happened with his mother and started working and studying, and now lives a more or less easier life, working as a vice principal in the nursery I work in despite his history. Addendum, clearing up where it happened. This happened in Tunisia a long time ago. We didn't have the whole televised horrors of society, but rather it was more or less a large section in the newspapers that people end up reading or seeing. Most of our TV stations, all 2 or 3 of them back then, were heavily regulated and monitored by the government when Ben Ali was in presidency, so it always either shows random Egyptian and Tunisian soap operas, or if it's news it's mostly good news, or political attacks against any opposing side that was against any opposition to Ben Ali or anyone that was under him. Newspapers on the other hand were practically free game. They post whatever they want freely, as long as they don't attack or offend any governmental bodies, president, cops, unless it has to do with a dirty cop, and especially the president's wife for some reason. Internet was also a rarity, only a few had it and used it, and it was mostly used for business and communication between family members. Did you know that in the town I was born in they just recently discovered that there's a device called the Wii-U? They only thought that there was only a Wii and that's about it. Insane, right? As much as I'd love to find the newspaper with the story, I can't seem to find it anywhere online, and I doubt he'd have a copy of I either, but I will ask him and see if he has it. But I will definitely see if I can find it, because I personally wanna see what they've written on the subject. I doubt they'll say anything necessarily bad, but they'll definitely throw some shade subliminally and call it a day. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, a like and a comment would mean a lot in YouTube's world. Share with us if you would have done things differently, and don't forget to support the original authors with an upvote. Links are in the description. Peace out, and catch you tomorrow.